of them, they do uncover what I call sharing useful truths. So I can't, on one hand, say, what's the connection, what's your experience, and then not expect from time to time someone to divulge something that they would prefer not to come out in the recording. The process is next week I would do a bit of an edit, a blog, a recording, etc. So it's wonderful. You should be able to join us this afternoon. Really looking forward to this session. We run these weekly. They're always about an engagement theme. I do a little bit of an intro both for the people who are new on the session, but also those watching the blog or the recording and wondering what this is all about. You'll see me surrounded by these physical props, and we're going to use some of the digital props this afternoon. Back in the day, as a business analyst, I worked out that I was helping organizations with some doodles and some breaking down of complexity, and I was involved in the wider team. Probably a little bit faster and a little bit more efficiently than some of the people around me. And I thought, this is a bit weird. Why do I keep getting asked to do this? And then suddenly you realize you're onto something, because the way I was breaking down a business was actually of interest to not least the senior stakeholders who could wave the hand at me and say, go to that team, find out what they do. We've got a session in the diary next week with the board. Come back and do that other thing that you do where you explain a business really simply. So that on the board behind me with these kind of symbols were basically the doodles. They've just been given some graphic design, put in a kind of game kind of playboard and symbols, and they're called now Big Picture. And I've spent far too many years telling everybody how handsome and lovely my baby Big Picture is. So I've stopped doing that. I'm very clear that it's either a change solution we're looking for, a performance solution, learning and onboarding, strategy, finance to come, asset management, etc. And then people say to me, but how can you do all of those things? Because actually, we're very social beings. We're very human. We like a chat. You can see from me when you land, this is not a PowerPoint show and tell. I don't kind of like those kind of things. I don't hang out with the people who like them things, only because I think from an energy perspective, we have to work a lot harder at engaging and collaborating and working together, particularly as we're stuck in our front rooms, back rooms, sheds, as I am, etc. So Big Picture was born. As I say, if you want to know anything more about it, you can go to yourbigpic.com /. And I think for today, the community we're hanging out in, it's about change. So / change. It's all about things like target operating models, where the business is now, how you get from here to there, and actually, most importantly, how do we do that, but how do we take people with us in that? So it's really important for me, the bottom up, giving everyone a voice, and taking people with us. Now, there's always a trade-off with that. That doesn't come by magic. And what I mean by that is we can't expect, and I think organizations overestimate the ability for our wider team to get involved with what we're doing, i.e. we might tell them things, we might email them things, we might ask them to fill out surveys, question and answers, etc. But that does not mean that people are going to behave or act any differently. In fact, it could well turn them off. It could increase disengagement. And I think we've got this kind of big problem in organizations when you scale it up to a big corporate, potentially, or even medium and small. How do we involve everybody? And you've got to believe in two things. One is everybody has an idea and a voice, as I believe all of us on this call have, and we'll involve you in different ways, if you so wish. And secondly, systems thinking is a big part of Big Picture. So as we work things through, the example with Kevin's help, what we're going to do is to connect different parts of the organizations in different ways. And if that leaves you a little bit confused, then that might be okay for a few seconds, even a few minutes. You might not even come out the other side of that. But what we're doing is provoking some thinking with regard to the approach that we're taking today. So it's all about you making some connections for yourself. So Kevin, a bit of an introduction from you. What's your background and what do you get up to?
Okay, so thanks for inviting me along today.
Pleasure.
I'm really looking forward to this session. My background is 27 years-ish in retail. Last two people that you may recognize that I worked with was Warehouse, the women's fashion brand, and Selfridges, which hopefully many of you, if not all of you, have heard of. And I was head of operations at Selfridges, head of customer relations, and unofficial head of change at Selfridges. So kind of very pertinent for what we're doing today, of course, as well. Wow. But I left there in 2003, struck out on my own, largely involved myself in leadership development as a coach and facilitator, not a trainer. For me, there's a very distinct difference. Although some people would probably slip into thinking I was a trainer because they learn stuff when I'm around. I have been doing that for the last 17 years, as I say, but in between times, I've also done a lot of personal development work as well. Some might call life coaching, I don't, because I don't particularly like that term personally, but it has been quite rewarding at times when I've done that. So interested in people change and how people respond to change and how people might choose to change and what do they might need to pay attention to in order to affect the change that they want to make. But also then extrapolating that out to organizations. If we are ourselves a living organization, how does an organization in itself change? And as a couple of you know, this year I've been investing time in a program called Shifting Paradigms, which we ran a kind of online conference in July to start to poke the stick at what organizations hold as paradigms and not even realizing they hold them quite oftentimes, the habits that they have, that they don't really question. And I'm keen, kind of side project, but growing in terms of mission, keen to poke that stick even more at organizations to see if we can shift some of the things that are held as beliefs that lead to the action that they take that isn't particularly productive, particularly I would suggest highlighted in the last 6 months.
Oh, well, it's interesting.
So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's interesting you end there, Kevin, because I was going to mention the same, like what better time to, at least, you know, one of the good things that it's created a kind of a shift or a real prod, a poke, or as you've put it, to make people maybe realize, certainly people, it's whether organizations have that that same effect. And you use the word organization, and I'm sure someone who's studied maybe Latin or something there in English can make the link between the organization and the organism, the natural ecosystem and organism that exists. Because I think the reason I mentioned Tim Peake a bit earlier, that learning from the natural world and what we do with our pretend structures, as they're sometimes called, in terms of hierarchy. You'll notice on the big picture board, there's management and administration at the bottom. That's me in my own way poking a stick at organizations to say, yes, there is a governance structure to this, and management is incredibly important for leadership, etc., and to take people with us. But actually, there's another part of management, which is if I'm talking to the wider team, then they're there to buoy up and support the business, which is why in big picture terms, management and admin, there's a link there as well, are at the bottom in more of a supporting role. Because when I'm speaking to the wider team, and you use in big picture, it's better to do that because it's less command and control, and people think about them working in an isolated cell or a little silo less because they can see that opening up. So let's get on. So that's a wonderful introduction. Thanks, Kevin. And we're going to come to you in a second, a few minutes for that. Think first or do first. So what we decided we would do with this to make it as interactive as possible on the board, and I think for those of you, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to share the board because I don't we'll see it on the recording, and it's also important for those of us who can't see what's going on. So please don't get confused trying to move symbols on the Zoom share, because you won't be able to, but you can share them on your board if you're in there. Now, some of you have done this because we got a bit of a head start on this. What the example we're going to use today, we're going to do a little set play where we've actually not thought a lot about something and we've just acted without really a lot of thought. And the example is, if I just move up to the top, is we're working in a business that increases knowledge of asset management. Just so happens I've got asset management on my mind this week, through practical one-to-one coaching and hands-on face-to-face training courses, so organizations can be more successful by increasing revenue and reducing costs. So quite specific, but the patterns work for any business. And in the lead up, if you are active on the board, and you may have done this already, I can see Tina's and Bill's red symbols up at the top there. If you just move them, if you haven't already, to a part of the business, that you think you add value. So Elizabeth, we've come to you. I'm going to be the lead trainer today, so I've put myself in training. You'll notice the operations or value adding part of the business is at the center. We've got the customer journey running left to right. So Tina, may I ask you if you could move your red team symbol
I've actually already created one myself. Sorry, it's already spanning between management, admin, delivery, and training.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
I didn't see that when I created my own.
Well, you know what, Tina? I love a bit of self motivation, and you've got on to, we have 2 Tinas, which is great. So what you've done there, Tina, and I didn't even know you'd done that, so that's brilliant, is you're spanning and almost touching 3 boxes. Why have you been quite particular with where you've placed yourself?
Because at the moment I'm a project manager, but I deal with Scrum teams who do the delivery, but I also deal with the training of them and other people within that.
Excellent. So what's interesting there, what you find with Big Picture, and I'll load as many insights into this as possible, it's important to recognize when you place yourself there, there may be some connections that you're making. So often we come to people in our facilitation to just ask them to explain, and there's no right or wrong. Bill, I'd love you to move yours in the top left if you can, but if you can't technically or for whatever reason, that's absolutely fine. It'll just help for the exercise. And Bill, if you could be a marketing guy today, that would be awesome. I don't know what your marketing's like, but if you just move yourself into marketing and just play that role today, it just means we've got more bases covered. Now, what I'd like you to do is to play this role out. We're just joined by Tunch, who's one of our practitioners, which is great. So we'll just welcome him in. What I'd like us to think about is when I run through this example and I'm going to do something without really thinking first, I'm just going to get on and do it. I'm a lead trainer. And one of the issues that I've had is suddenly, as a lead trainer, I've identified that suddenly I have no attendees. Now, you might have spotted a clue in the purpose. I use the word practical and hands-on, and I use the phrase face-to-face. Okay, so what I mean by that is there's a lot of hands-on. In the past, there was a lot of face-to-face work in this business, and something bad has happened, and probably me as the lead trainer would place my challenge there as no attendees. So these face-to-face training courses that are going on are suddenly not happening anymore, broken, and I don't have time to think about it too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going online. I came up with it overnight. I didn't really think much about it. I just react to what's gone on. So I'm a pretty influential guy in this business. And so I'm going to just go online and I'm going to use this platform, this bit of technology that actually I just knew about because someone told me about. I haven't really done a lot of research into it, but someone said it was okay. So I've jumped on an online training platform and I'm going to port all of the content that I've got into that online training course. Now, what I would like you to do to help me is you're all around me, Hilary, Bill, Kevin, Tina, and Elizabeth, what I'd like you to do to think about is, for you, from your perspective, what challenge does that reactive approach give? Indeed, you might identify an opportunity in what I've just done, but it may be a challenge. So what I'd like you to do is to grab a challenge symbol, and I'll drag a few more on. And what I'd like you to do is to maybe, you could put the challenge next to yourself, or you could place it somewhere where you think that challenge is. And I would love to have the mic open. Maybe I've seen one move next to Elizabeth. If you want to change the text on it, you just double click. Elizabeth, you're flying. What's your thought? Oh, it was you, Kevin. I thought it was Elizabeth.
I'm on mute as well.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Sorry, Elizabeth. I was changing the name of the title while Elizabeth was moving it. So my apologies, Elizabeth.
So
I nabbed yours.
That's all right. Go on. That's interesting.
My thought was,
if that happened in a room physically, it would be interesting how that plays out. And the board is performant in respect of it avoids clashes, but sometimes is we both go after the same symbol. Anyway, Kevin, what was your thought on the design?
Yeah. So the reason I put myself where I did, just to explain that, because I'll explain what I did, was I like the design space as much as delivery, possibly even a little more in my coaching and facilitation. I love the thought and the concept of design and space. So yes, you're going to go virtual, you're going to go online, but there's a whole design thinking around doing that needs to be in play that will present challenges to us because we've not done it before.
Oh, beautiful. Love it.
Mine
Yeah.
was pretty similar, to be honest. Mine was pretty similar in that as a training deliverer, having not delivered training online, that would be a challenge for me to learn new skills and how to do that differently. Because there's obviously a different skill set required to do online training than face-to-face.
Wonderful. I love it. Great idea. Hilary, what was your, you moved to challenge, what was yours?
I think my challenge was inclusion. I feel there's a whole decision after being made, and I'm just wondering what impact that has on me and, you know, those around me. Therefore, how can I get involved in it? So it sounds great to do something virtual, but I'm just kind of trying to understand where's the buy-in and how are we going to make it happen, and do people actually even have the facilities to attend in this way? So I'm just thinking, how do we make it happen, and where's the buy-in?
Yeah, wonderful. I love that. Thank you. Tina, from your perspective, playing a more of a management role, how are you seeing things? My kind of reactive, go straight at it kind of view.
Is this with respect to like COVID and being online? Because that's
yeah,
what
like I've rushed to
about,
take stuff online. I've almost done it over the weekend as the lead trainer. I've put it online pretty much over the weekend. I'm very reactive. I've gone at it. You're sat in management looking at that thinking, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I mean, I've shipped something, I've got something out there, but how do you see it from a management perspective?
Sorry, it's just because I'm delaying a little bit because I was just thinking the main
no,
challenge
that's fine.
I have
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Tina. It's fine because I think you've put something in suppliers, haven't you? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the main challenge we have is getting requirements from suppliers in our world. But if you're talking about like a COVID kind of thing, reacting to COVID and stuff, I need to maybe consider that if that's
brilliant. And there is a kind of
Martin?
there is. Yeah, I will come to you, Hugh, in a sec. I'm just going to say there is a role there for management and leadership to ensure that the whole thing has been done properly. So there's probably a risk effort there. Hugh, was that yourself?
Yeah, I put a challenge in there because one of the major challenges I see in the difference between being in a workshop or being online is supplying material for the attendees. And this is something that literally we've just done, and we're now using the Smart School Initiative, which basically sends out some material, smart learning, some people call it, or flipped classroom. So you send out some material beforehand so that they can have a look at the material, and therefore when they actually do attend online, they've already got some sort of information that you want to use within the classroom to overcome the fact that you're not going to have material to hand out to them if you were in the workshop.
Yeah, lovely, Hugh. So at this point, that's a challenge because there's an absence of that. So maybe a piece of the jigsaw has gone missing, and so that's lovely. Yep. So what we're doing is we're thinking around a problem, and already I would like to think as each person is speaking, and of course we're limited with time here, is it's just sparking other thoughts, and there are other symbols we could bring in, such as process, money, measure, and technology. And I'm going to hand over to Kevin in a sec. I love whoever's put that at the top of the page. These things are not scripted. That is an absolute stormer challenge. Who put that next to the purpose at the top?
Me.
Oh, what a wonderful segue. This wasn't scripted, was it, Kevin? Kevin has put something at the top. So I'm going to come to you, Kevin. So I'm going to say, I'm going to cross my arms and say, Mark, the lead trainer, has become aware through conversation or a big picture session that there are some challenges in the approach that I'm taking. So as you present the case for thinking first, I'm just going to clear the board a little bit to tidy it up. So when we've had 10 or 15 minutes of that, we can start repopulating it with the opportunities that a thinking first approach does. And people, by the way, can choose whether thinking or doing first. So over to you, Kevin.
So look, I'm going to muse more than, I'm not here to kind of teach you anything or lecture anything here. In fact, I've probably got more questions than anything else. And as I said earlier, I've been a coach and facilitator for the last 17 years and immersed myself in the area of self-development. And self-development has probably been propagating the thought that if you want to change in a big way, then you need to shift your thinking. You need to shift your beliefs and values particularly. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much where self-development comes from an awful lot of time, is shift your thinking, think a different way, and you'll act differently and therefore get different results. If you think about Stephen Covey, for example, in the 7 Habits, he has a model, a framework he uses called See, Do, Get. In other words, how we see the world results in what we do, results in what we get, the results that we get from that. And virtuous, virtual or vicious circle, virtuous or vicious circle, whichever way you look at it. And then you look at more recent times, people like Amy Cuddy, if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy, who started to think, how do I act my way into thinking and being something differently and starting doing things? And from what I read at any rate, psychology starts to shift a little bit and say, in order to get the paradigm shifts, in order to get the thinking differently, perhaps we need to do things differently first. And so it's almost in my mind, well, which one is it first? Is there an order of, is it contextual? Is there different things for people? But then when you look at organizations, who I have to say are probably, in my opinion, more used to planning and thinking before they do things, depending on what type of industry they're working in, can businesses, can organizations start to do things in a way that shifts the thinking? Or do we need to shift the thinking first in order to do things differently in organization? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer. And it'd be interesting to use this time to perhaps play it out on the big pick board and look at, well, if we were to think first, what would we do differently to what we've just done?
Yeah, grand. And can I try something? Sorry
to interrupt, but how do you think differently? How do you think differently first when we're so conditioned and so ingrained in thinking about business the way we've always thought about business?
Yeah. And I just want to capture that idea. Thanks, Kevin, because I wasn't sure where you were going to go with that. But what I love the thought is I predicted or thought that you were going to do a piece on thinking. Well, we are talking about thinking, but actually you've surprised me because you're talking about doing some active work, but with the thought as a kind of output for that. So you're looking to do something active, and I've put some process symbols back on the board in the top right. And I'm trying to make sense of what you've said there. So I wonder you could give an example.
Let me elaborate a little bit.
Yes, please, because I love it. It's interesting me.
I don't know whether there's a right way or a wrong way. I don't know, because psychologists, I don't believe, know at this moment in time in terms of people and self-development. And certainly I'm not sure how many people have looked at it from organizations. What I do hear and come across an awful lot of the time is people saying we need to change things in organizations, strip management layers out, for example, get rid of the sacred cows that we've always done that we've never questioned. I think I gave you an example of someone I worked with ages ago. Well, actually, Hilary, may I give you the example of bonus schemes? Okay, so Hilary was asking me once, what are other people doing about bonus schemes? I said, well, same old thing that most people are doing about bonus schemes, but maybe it's time to get rid of them and change them completely, change the way we think about bonus schemes and do something radically different, which would then perhaps lead to a change in thinking rather than thinking about it first before doing it. So I don't know the answer to it, but what I do know, and why I put that bit up at the purpose, is whatever we do, based on what you said earlier as well, Martin, it's a system. So whatever you do at whatever place you do it, it's going to have some impact on the rest of the system. Whatever level you go in at, whatever you do, excuse my dogs, is going to cause some disruption. And what I'm coming across for organizations, particularly at the moment, and I don't know whether you guys are doing this, it's bringing into question what their identity is, let alone what their purpose is. So a lot of, I've done some work with Vodafone, and they've questioned, are we, we're no longer a mobile communications company anymore, we're something completely different, and they're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, so nice one. So Kevin, I noted 2 things that you've said just as examples, because this might help the way people are thinking about it and digest it, because I said in the introduction, it's good sometimes to be confused. I call it a thunk. So it stops you in your tracks, and it's certainly getting me to think with all my kind of brain power. I've pulled 2 things from what you've said, and I'm just putting them in the board, is consider what our purpose really is. I think you said that at the end, that was your number 2. Is that fair? And I think that's why you put the challenge up there.
Yeah.
And the second one was, I'm going to actually number them. I think your number 1 was, you talked about bonus schemes, but I actually noted it as reward and recognition. Is that what the thing's called in general? Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, so, that's one example. You could have many other examples of that.
Well,
let me just kind of
go ahead.
Let me just pitch in this, because I don't think it's just about purpose. And so I put out on LinkedIn, but some of you may have seen, because I associated it to this webinar, someone responded. I talked about, do we think first or do first? And someone responded and said, in order for them to become a runner, they had to start running first in order to shift their identity. And when I look at organizations, I think that is also the case. So do we need to look at simultaneously, if we're going to go online to deliver asset management learning, do we need to start to consider ourselves different to what we already think ourselves as?
That's beautiful, Kevin. And when I wrote that purpose, you may have spotted I was deliberately, how should I put it? I wouldn't have written a purpose like that normally, but I loaded it with things like practical, one-to-one coaching, and basically setting some parameters, and hands-on face-to-face training. And I think the point is, if you could still have the same aim, which is for organizations to be more successful by increasing revenue and reducing costs, but those 2 lines, which are practical one-to-one coaching and hands-on face-to-face training, clearly I was loading the purpose with something that should get addressed. And I didn't tell you that in advance, but the fact you spotted that as a challenge is interesting. That one of the things you should probably think about first is the purpose, and that might be actually the number 1 on there. And actually the reward and recognition is maybe number 2. And what I'm interested in is, we've got a mass of experience and knowledge on this call, and it would be remiss of us, and I know you support this, Kevin, to go to one of the collaborators to see if we've identified 1 or 2. Would it be really great in the next 15 minutes if we could come off with 5, and I think Kevin's given us 2. Could anyone pitch in, and I can drive the board, or you can, I'm driving it in the background, I'll share with you. Can anyone pitch in with what number 3 might be based on the rationale that Kevin's putting forward? And it's all very fresh and new, and that's lovely. So I'd love a new idea for number 3. Would anybody willing to have a go at that one?
Sense of place.
Oh, for whom, Bill?
Well, at this moment in time, we've gone from the huge, great organizations to community-based teams, right? So your sense of place depends on your center of gravity. So if I want to change an organization, where do I start? So basically, we're all on this spiral. We all go up and down the spiral. Given what COVID's happened, what floor are you on now you've never been on before? And how do you have a conversation with that person you've never spoken to before?
Wonderful.
That's
so are we talking about an individual within a team, within the business? So we're talking about a sense of place for an individual working within an organization at a personal level.
It's about the I and the we, the individual and the collective.
Yeah.
So
nice.
if I'm working on floor 5 and I've never spoken to someone on floor 6, what question do I ask on floor 6 I've never asked before?
Yeah, that's lovely. And I'm just interpreting that, Bill. Would you think there's a particular part of the business that is more prevalent than other parts, or is it for all parts of the business equally? If we're talking about this business or any other,
I would look at what's stopping you now. That's a question. What's stopping me? Why am I not able to deliver this? Because I have to think differently. That's a great question to ask. That's one of the questions I ask. What question would I ask I've never asked you before?
And is this because the person on floor 3 and 5 is you've never met, because they may be working in different ways, because there are different work patterns, and you haven't had the chance to allow serendipity to happen, and there aren't those coming across people kind of conversations so much? So those questions are really important, that before we run towards any solution, and I know I've just used a simple example, taking time out to determine a sense of place for every individual, that's a really human, and on the hierarchy of needs or wherever it is, it's really important for us to take time to do that, even if it's the simplest thing about a bit of small talk when we come on an online session before we jump in, which seems to be one of the themes now, that we treat them more about going into a room and having small talk. Is that fair? So a sense of place of every individual is a brilliant number 3, and I'm just going to put it in management so they remember to leave that time open for that to happen. Is that fair?
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'd love a 4 and 5 in the time we've got, because I think we could get 5 out of this, and I'd love there to be an output.
Location. Change of location for work purposes, working from home, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings with it a huge new way of approaching work, both from the staff level and from the management level.
And why is that important, do you think, Hugh, from a thinking first perspective? Is it because we need to fully consider the impact of that, because it has a massive impact on the individual?
Well, first of all, it is a new environment for a lot of people. This is something that a huge amount of businesses didn't want to happen in the past, always fought against it. And now they've been put in a position where it's got to happen. So they've got to change their mindset, how they interact with their staff who are now, if they're still working, who are working from home. And it builds a completely different type of trust within the staff that you've got. And I also feel that there has to be a different approach towards the staff. I put something on LinkedIn today about how you would treat people at home. If you're a manager, how would you speak to them differently to the way you used to speak to them face to face? Because your body language, if you're motivating or inspiring people, your body language is completely different if you're face to face than if you are trying to do the same thing, which is motivating and inspiring the people to do the work that you want them to do when they're in a different location.
Yeah, grand. That's lovely, Hugh. And Tina, it's interesting.
If I could pick up,
yeah, go on ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
Sorry, Martin. Can I just pick up on that, because I think that's really interesting, because when I think about what Hugh said, and I agree largely with what you said, Hugh, but I also then think about the old paradigm of leaders and managers having to motivate people, rather than now more current thinking might be how they create an environment, and therefore need to be more cognizant of people's environment and the resources around that environment in order for them to be motivated. And I think that's one of the changes of thinking that has started to emerge in the last 6 months, is I'm not in the same situ as my people, so I can't motivate them as easily. So they're starting to have to think about how they do that in a different way by creating the conditions so people are motivated. It's a subtle shift, and I'm sure that you kind of see that, but it's, for me, that's one of the shifts that needs to happen.
Yeah, wonderful.
Jump in on that one as well, then, because I think that's a really interesting bit, and it's good to hear trust being mentioned there. And it's one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of, particularly the longer that the pandemic and these lockdowns have happened. A lot of places are saying it's going to be April before they get in, and I think there's there's been an initial part where everybody ended up in lockdown and everyone was locked down. Therefore, there wasn't that much of a choice. And yes, you were a key worker, and there was a lot of support being given and encouragement being given around working from home, how you work from home, you know, whether people had kids, dogs, whatever, running around the place in the background, and people were very supportive of that. And it feels in a very, very short space of time that that's kind of gone a little bit. And it's how, you know, you build the trust, but also I really like that thing around how you build the conditions and how you make it not just, I say it's one dimensional, but it's more than that. And the motivation, because at the minute it feels like it's very much either Zoom or email or a phone call. I'm just wondering, within this idea here with this, whether it be virtual training or whatever, it's how do you get other ideas to come to the forefront from the teams on what would motivate them? And it goes back, I guess, to the bonus conversation, Kevin, that we've had loads of times. It's a little bit similar around asking the team, what is it that they want or what is it that motivates them? Because it's exhausting trying to personally motivate somebody all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think it's impossible. Personally, I think you can't motivate
Yeah,
me.
exhausting and impossible, because you can't do all things to all people.
Yeah, you can't motivate me. Only I can be motivated by what conditions you set, how you treat me, how you set up my environment or help me set up my environment. So, but you can't motivate me.
No, that's wonderful. I'm aware of time. I'd love to get a fifth one out, but that's my own indulgence. 4 is a nice number. I don't know if anyone can extract a fifth one from that one, from that last bit of chat. Have we got 4?
Well, yeah.
What was that one?
Connection.
There's got to be another one.
Connection.
I think this, yeah.
Connection, yeah. These things are all great to be doing at the beginning and all really important to do, but it's keeping them going. So continuous connection.
Yeah, wonderful.
Especially to a second sort of.
What kind of connection would that be? Connection with each individual that's involved in the change. So ensuring that you don't just do it without creating that sense of connection for people somehow.
Yeah, so I think organisation wide and then individually at lower levels amongst teams. But I mean, the company that I've just moved to send out regular sort of postcards to everybody, you know, snail mail postcards, which, you know, it's so nice to actually get something in the post and you actually feel like you're being looked after and considered. But just things, not work things all the time as well, you know, having like maybe a weekly get together and just having a chat rather than always dedicated and focused on the work, just, you know, being human beings rather than work colleagues. It's those coffee machine moments, isn't it, in the kitchen, trying to recreate some of those rather than just at the desk talking to people. Yeah. That's when you start to find out if there's any other issues or problems, mental health problems in their lives as well. But just that general human connection, which is much more difficult to create virtually.
Yeah, I think you've summed that up nicely there, that human connection. So what I'd like to do, I mean, we've got the 5 there, which I think is great. Obviously, we're moving at pace and we haven't got a lot of time. It's a simulation of how it might work. And I've led the board development in the last 10 minutes or so just for speed. But what you've seen me swap in and out, if you are in the board, if you just pull out that opportunities drawer in the top right, and I think we'll just go around in the time that we've got left. And obviously this is a bit random and it is a bit of a game, but it does showcase one of the facilitation techniques that we use. So if I were to start, let's say, with Tina, if you pull out that opportunities drawer from the 5 that it's in the top right, from the 5 that we've noted, they're in kind of, I'm going to put them in numerical order. Which do you think you would put top, and maybe a brief reason why? Which would be the most important to get right first? You're on mute, Tina. Maybe we need one of them. Maybe we need that as one of the
Number 4.
doing things.
Number 4, the change in location and how that affects us, I think, is the one that I've seen.
Oh, that's
impact.
interesting. And a big kudos to for Hugh for chipping in with that one. Brilliant. So if you just move that one to the top, Tina, and I'm not going to go around in particular order. Elizabeth, I think you can get access. Which would you move to the top and why?
I think I'd probably move that creating the human connection, because I think without that, a lot of the other stuff falls over. So I think you've got to have that in place for everything else to be built on. That's almost your foundation for me. So I think that would be something that's really important.
Go on then, move it to the top, please. Let's be active. And Margaret, same for you. You know the drill now. Which one for you? And please move it to the top, or where you think it should be.
Yeah, I'm not in the board at the moment.
Sorry. I'll move it for you.
Identity. It's identity and purpose. I would put at the top. Like, what are we really here for?
Yeah. That's that one, isn't it? Yeah. No, not that one. That one.
Number 1, Martin.
Number one.
Yeah, I got it. And Hugh, which would you shift around? Just a little game. Which one would you put where?
I would put number 5, to be honest. I think the human connection is very, very important.
Now, what's interesting about this, and I know I'm pushing you down a particular route in the time that we've got, clearly you can have fun with the facilitation with this, because you can poll around, you can give someone the hot pen, you can ask them to team up, you can ask them to gamify it, but we're just playing around. So obviously who speaks last is going to get kind of the dibs on this. Hilary, from your perspective, which would you maybe put at the top?
It's a hard one. I still think I'd put number 1, consider what our identity is.
Okay.
Simply because I think if everybody understands that and what the purpose is, then the others like 5 and 4 sit then underneath and then fall into place.
Wonderful. And that's brilliant. And thanks everyone for playing for long for that. I've tried to simulate how a team session could go. So I'm just going to stop sharing that. You can continue playing in the board, and I've tried to bring in as many people as possible. So I think what we've demonstrated there with a bit of content, and I think this is fair to say, this is a conversation that could well happen in a change theatre in a business, however big or small the organization is. And I'm testing myself, but we have used a fictional company. We have used an example, both of which could be real. We have come together and played different roles, and I know some placed their roles and then we played along. But the fact is, a team could and should be involved in this conversation. And I have had my ears and eyes opened by some of the ideas that have come out. And I don't think any one brain in an organization, even if it's the highest paid person's opinion, which generally gets the most airtime, is generally always the right answer. And I think we sometimes oversimplify the fact this is a strategy or something at the top of the shop, that if we do need to put these training courses online, we need to think about lots of things. And those lots of things are the knowledge and the ideas that you all have as different experiences and stories. I'm sure there's loads of stories. In fact, Kevin, I know you're a storyteller, so you mentioned a couple of stories. We go off and tell our stories, and I think that is wonderful that we have a chance to tell our stories. It's just with big picture, we suggest which stories there are by saying, what are the symbols that you have and what does it mean to you? It's a great level playing field. So what we do at this point, because time is upon us, we officially close and say thank you very much, and I'll kind of cut the thing there, and I'll thank you all very much, but we just leave the mic open and the discussion going. If you need to drop off when you can just drop a thing into chat. I can stay on for an extra 10 minutes and have a little chinwag for you. What I would open it up to say is, if anyone has had a story that they haven't managed to tell, which they think is relevant that we could learn from, please now chip in and tell your story, if there is one.
Can I just say that number 5 is the most important thing there? If I'm talking about name, off, how do I tell other people what I'm doing? When a tree falls down, all the other trees come and look after it and take that knowledge out of that 100-year-old tree and share it with other people. They build different connections to align themselves with what's going on the ground. That's what we need to do in business.
No, that's brilliant, Bill. And this, I'm now making a decision in my head as to whether to suggest I might take you on and counter that. But the purpose in your voice, I think you might be quite a person to take on. So I'm going to pass it over and say, would anyone like to contest that rather strong case that Bill has made? Are we going to say, yes, Bill, you're so right? Anyone want to counter Bill?
Seeing as that was my choice, no, I completely agree with Bill.
Oh, well done, Tina.
Cop out.
Are you working in cahoots behind the scenes on the back channel? So, Kevin, is that a fair case? Now, I'm an analyst, so I'm going to say, hang on, why is 5 at the top when it came out last? And actually, why did it come out 5th? When, if it was so important, why didn't it come out first?
Yeah. So may I, if I can, just take. I was reflecting on a conversation I was having earlier with someone who I invited on here, but too late, really. I think, which is that pretty much everybody I'm talking to, actually, not just this one person today, but pretty much everyone I'm talking to at the moment is busy. You know, Zoom call after Zoom call, WebEx after WebEx, whatever there is, and doing stuff. And it made me think. People are doing an awful lot, but they're not really thinking an awful lot. The quality of thinking, I think, is starting to be impaired in this moment of time where actually we could be taking stock and thinking more and having a quality of thinking. So I would, despite me saying that, the purpose identity is really important, I don't think that comes first. I think the connections with others has to come first to give space to build a quality of thinking, which isn't there at the moment because we're busy doing stuff. So at the end of the day, we've done lots of stuff this week, but have we started to move forward as an organization into a different place that the market, the environment?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's wonderful, Kevin. And my very personal take on that is every minute of every day I plow into my life work, my specialist knowledge that I've always wanted as a little boy to like bring something new. I always wanted to do something of my own and bring ideas to the party. There is a sense of resistance all the time. Seth Godin talks about it, that resistance to fit in and go along. Like, I actually envy people at the moment who have a proper job, as I call it, who have a structure, who can work within that structure, because they must think a lot less all of the time about, am I doing the right thing? Because I don't know about you, I'm running a bit hot, all thinking and over computing, overthinking, and that's not healthy from a mental health perspective, that you're always thinking because there's very little structure around. And some days I think I would love to work within a structure, because it feels like we're running a bit blind and a little bit hot if you are doing your own thing, because clients are not buying. So you're not getting that validation that what you're offering is the right thing. You're almost thinking, I'm going to keep putting this stuff out on the hope that in 6 months' time, someone says to me, that exercise bike video you put out in October was the best idea ever. But, you know, I don't know if it is a good idea, and I'm running blind and a bit hot if you can do both those things at the same time. I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but I feel I'm in a dangerous area, because it financially, it is going to start to look a bit bad if 6 months' time I'm still doing that same thing.
Yeah, I think it's the same for everybody, though, isn't it? I mean, we're in an environment that nobody has been in before, and you know, it was interesting when Kevin said that everybody seems busy. I see that as well, but I don't see people actually getting any reward for being busy, and that to me is the big worry. You know, we can pretend as much as we want that everything is okay, but at the end of the day, you know, there's going to come a time when you have to face up to, you've got to make some money, and I find it very sad. The amount of people I talk to always saying, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day. I was on 51 Zoom calls last month and stuff like this, you know, and I'm thinking, how much of a return on investment were those Zoom calls? Because just sitting down here now for an hour or so, it's an hour of my time, or your time, where you should be earning money during that time. You know what I mean?
And maybe that Zoom call and that is part of the structure, isn't it? That you think you're part of that kind of, that does give you a structure because your diary is full. And it's actually nice to not have a diary full. So no, it's interesting reflections. I'm aware of time and we might have life to get on with. It's a good reminder for Buell that I'm sure I've got some children. I often forget I've got some children to pick up from various parts of Yorkshire at this point. And they're often being left stranded when one of the discussion topic goes on. So I won't take any more liberties with your time, and absolutely a really good discussion. I'll watch it back, I'll reflect. A lot of new things came up. Everyone had a chance to contribute. And I'll be in touch next week about a bit of a follow, a bit of feedback, etc. Have lovely weekends. And it's an absolute pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Martin. Cheers
Look
all.
after yourself. Bye.